Today's operation is an example of the unprecedented collaboration between the military and the Department of Justice. Almost 45,000 pounds of cocaine and 3,800 pounds of marijuana.
A shocking update has just emerged following the military's intervention against a group of cartels trying to smuggle drugs across the border. Only days ago, a covert operation ended with the capture of several high-ranking members and the seizure of what officials are now confirming was over $1 million worth of drugs. According to the first wave of reports, this was supposed to be a clean win, another blow dealt in America's escalating war on fentanyl. But tonight, those early headlines only tell half the story, because the full reports have now been released, and what investigators uncovered inside that compound goes far beyond cash and narcotics. Hidden in the shadows of the raid were stockpiles of weapons, encrypted devices, and something so tragic that even trained officials admitted it left them in shock. The drugs were bad enough, but what the Army stumbled onto next suggested something far more dangerous, something that points not just to smuggling, but to a war quietly being prepared just beyond America's borders. And if the evidence is accurate, it may already be too late to pretend this is just another drug bust. Let's break it down. But first, here's a quick recap of the military's interception of the cartel's smuggling operation just days ago. It happened in the dead of night. At exactly 4:37 a.m., while most of the border towns were still asleep, the silence was shattered by the low thrum of Black Hawk helicopters cutting across the sky. Below them, infrared drones scanned the terrain while ground units from the 75th Ranger Regiment closed in. The target was a compound just a few miles from what locals call Cartel Island, a notorious stretch of land along the Rio Grande. For years, rumors swirled about what was hidden there: bunkers, stash houses, secret tunnels, but until now, no one had ever dared to strike it head-on. This time, the Army did. In under 10 minutes, the stronghold was surrounded, suspects were pulled from their beds. Cache after cache of drugs, weapons, and encrypted devices were seized before the cartel even realized what had hit them. On the surface, it looked like a clean win. But the deeper agents dug, the clearer it became that this was no ordinary bust, because buried inside that compound was evidence that pointed to something much bigger and much darker than a simple trafficking operation. When the first reports came in, officials wasted no time announcing what they'd found. Inside the compound were bricks of narcotics, stacked in duffel bags and hidden beneath false walls. Street value, over $1 million. For years, cartel shipments worth that much had slipped quietly across the border, vanishing into American cities. But this time, it was different. The Army had caught them in the act, seizing the fortune before it could ever be sold. On paper, it was a huge win. Headlines declared the bust a major blow to cartel profits. Commentators called it one of the most successful raids in recent memory. But here's the thing: the drugs weren't the real story. They were just the surface. Because tucked away in the shadows of that same compound was something investigators didn't expect, something that made the $1 million haul look almost irrelevant in comparison. And once they uncovered it, the raid turned from a simple drug bust into something far more dangerous. In a hidden room beneath the compound, investigators uncovered stockpiles that didn't look like cartel gear at all. Alongside the drugs were military-grade weapons, rocket launchers, tactical rifles, encrypted radios. And then came the most chilling discovery of all: body armor tagged with insignias that weren't Mexican at all, but Chinese. Think about that. This wasn't just a gang guarding its product. This was a cartel outfitted for war, using gear traced back to foreign suppliers. The $1 million in drugs was supposed to be the story. But now, officials realized they had stumbled onto something much bigger. What if the cartels weren't just trafficking? What if they were preparing for something closer to insurgency? And what if foreign governments were quietly arming them to make it happen? That was the question investigators began asking as the evidence piled up. And it's why this raid wasn't simply a win. It was a warning. Now, what are the implications of this discovery? What could this mean for America's war against the cartels? Well, keep watching to hear mine and other politicians' main theories. For decades, America treated the cartel problem like organized crime. DEA agents ran stings, Border Patrol seized shipments, and politicians gave speeches about getting tough. But what happened in this raid forced a chilling realization. This isn't just crime anymore, it's warfare. That's exactly why, earlier this year, President Trump did something no U.S. leader had dared to do before. He designated the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. With those few words, everything changed. Suddenly, federal authorities didn't have to treat these cartels like criminals to be arrested. They could treat them like enemies of the state. Surveillance, asset freezes, drone strikes, even direct military action were now on the table. And this raid, with its foreign-made armor, encrypted systems, and military-grade weapons, became the first test case of that new reality. It proved that the cartels aren't just drug dealers anymore. They are a paramilitary force sitting just beyond the border, and sometimes even inside it. Which raises the question, if the cartels are preparing for war, then what exactly are they planning to use against us? Behind all the headlines and military briefings, the real reason this matters is painfully simple. Fentanyl is killing Americans at a rate we've never seen before. More than 300,000 lives a year are being lost. Sons, daughters, parents, friends. Every community in the country has felt it. From small towns in Ohio to suburbs in Oregon, funerals have become the silent backdrop of this crisis. And here's what makes it worse. According to former cartel operatives, fentanyl isn't just being trafficked anymore, it's being weaponized. Cartel factions are deliberately flooding U.S. streets with doses so potent they were never meant for survival. To them, addicts are not customers, they're expendable. Whistleblowers have described children kidnapped and drugged into obedience, used as pawns in cartel battles. Addicts turned into cannon fodder, walking shields thrown into firefights. One former sicario said it bluntly, "They treat them like cattle for the slaughter." This isn't a drug business, it's human sacrifice disguised as commerce, and it's why the U.S. military was called in, not just to seize money or drugs, but to cut off the head of an operation that views human lives as disposable. But even that doesn't capture the full scale of what investigators are uncovering, because behind the cruelty is something even more organized. A playbook that shows just how advanced the cartels have become. What investigators are uncovering now only confirms what insiders have whispered for years. Cartels don't operate like street gangs. They operate like militaries. Former operatives describe a world with chains of command, ranks, and specialized units. There are enforcers, scouts, counterintelligence officers, and even drone operators. They train in tactics learned from corrupt soldiers and ex-special forces across Latin America. Some units even practice with night vision gear and sniper rifles, just like modern armies. And their code is brutal. Soldiers addicted to meth or cocaine are kept high to dull fear, then discarded the moment they become liabilities. Rivals are executed not just to eliminate threats, but to send messages through gruesome displays. Every act of violence is a psychological weapon, meant to terrify entire communities into silence. This isn't business, it's insurgency. A slow-motion war waged with discipline, strategy, and fear, which makes the latest raid even more alarming. Because when investigators traced the weapons and armor pulled from that compound, the trail didn't just stop in Mexico. It led overseas, to countries with a vested interest in weakening the United States. The $1 million in drugs was shocking. The military-grade weapons were worse. But what truly rattled investigators were the foreign fingerprints hidden in the evidence. Some of the weapons seized in the raid were traced back to Eastern European black markets, the same channels once used to funnel arms into Middle Eastern war zones. But it didn't stop there. The most chilling discovery was the body armor marked with Chinese insignias. Not fakes, not knockoffs, but authentic military-grade gear. Think about what that means. A cartel compound on U.S. soil stocked with equipment linked directly to foreign suppliers. And according to Pentagon sources, this wasn't a one-off shipment. Intelligence suggests a steady pipeline of hardware, technology, and chemical precursors moving through covert channels into cartel hands. If true, this changes everything, because it means cartels aren't just drug traffickers, they're potential proxies in a global shadow war, a way for rival powers to destabilize America from within without ever firing a shot themselves. And the scariest part? This wasn't the only border investigators needed to worry about. While eyes were locked on Mexico, the cartels were quietly building something far more insidious, just across America's northern border. For years, America's focus has been locked on the southern border. Walls, checkpoints, patrols, and drone footage of convoys trying to cross the Rio Grande. But while the spotlight stayed fixed on Mexico, the cartels were quietly setting up a new front in Canada. Investigators now believe entire suburban neighborhoods in British Columbia and Alberta have been turned into cartel strongholds. Picture this: a quiet street, kids riding bikes, barbecues on the porch, And inside the basement of one of those homes, a fentanyl super lab running day and night. How do they get away with it? Simple. Canada inspects less than 1% of incoming cargo through ports like Vancouver. Add to that a shockingly easy tourist visa system for Mexican nationals, and the cartels found a perfect loophole. No walls, no desert crossings, just paperwork and shipping containers. Once inside Canada, the rest is effortless. There's no 2,000-mile southern wall, no heavy patrols, just 5,000 miles of unguarded border with the United States. In some places, you can cross into Montana on a dirt bike in under 20 minutes. That's how the cartels shifted the game. While America was fortifying the South, they slipped in from the North. And the deeper investigators look, the clearer it becomes. This isn't just about smuggling anymore. It's about infiltration. If the raids and seizures revealed how powerful the cartels are on the battlefield, what's happening online shows just how deep their reach has become in everyday life. Because this isn't just a drug war anymore, it's a culture war. In parts of Mexico, cartel leaders are treated like folk heroes. Their faces show up on hats, jewelry, even candles and religious statues. But now, that culture has spilled across the border and taken root in places no one expected, including Canada and the United States. Scroll through TikTok or Instagram, and you'll see it. Young men wearing El Chapo hats, flashing cartel hand signs, or blasting narco ballads in their cars. Some aren't even connected to the cartels. They're just fans. To them, cartel life looks glamorous. Wealth, power, fearlessness, and that's the danger. While the military fights cartels in the field, social media has been busy normalizing them. Violence and terror have been rebranded as lifestyle and fashion. Murder sold with a soundtrack. This shift matters because it shows the cartel's influence isn't limited to borders or smuggling routes. It's seeping into culture, shaping perceptions, and winning over the next generation before they've even seen the battlefield. And if that sounds alarming, the next discovery makes it worse. Because the cartels aren't just shaping culture, they're embedding themselves inside America's institutions. The scariest part of this story isn't just what the cartels are doing across the border, it's what they've already managed to do inside the United States. Investigators have uncovered that cartels aren't just smuggling drugs and weapons, they're buying influence. In border towns across Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico, whispers of corruption are becoming harder to ignore. Local sheriffs suddenly looking the other way, judges mysteriously lenient with cartel-linked suspects, city officials whose bank accounts don't match their salaries. And it goes beyond people. Cartels are pouring billions into real estate, buying homes and businesses in cash. Entire neighborhoods are being snapped up, with fortified basements built for meetings and storage. To outsiders, it looks like a booming housing market. But behind those walls, cartel operations run quietly, disguised as everyday life. Even worse, the money trail is evolving. Cryptocurrencies like Monero are being used to wash profits, making it nearly impossible for authorities to track where billions of fentanyl dollars end up. Some of it funds weapons, some of it goes to bribes, and some of it may already be buying political power. Which leads to the chilling question: what happens when a cartel doesn't just influence local officials, but embeds itself so deeply that removing them threatens political collapse? When most people imagine cartel power, they think of drugs crossing the border or gunfights in the desert. But the truth is far more unsettling. The cartels have learned how to blend into the very systems that were supposed to stop them. Whistleblowers inside federal agencies have admitted what many suspected. Cartel networks are no longer just underground. They're hiding in plain sight. Fake shell companies launder profits through trucking businesses, construction firms, and shipping contracts. Banks process suspicious transfers without asking questions, because money is money. And then there's real estate. In cities from Houston to Los Angeles, cartel-linked buyers are snapping up luxury homes in cash, not to live in, but to turn into fortified safe houses. Some are reinforced with bulletproof basements, hidden vaults, and encrypted communications hubs. To the outside world, they look like mansions. Inside, they're command centers. Even law enforcement has quietly admitted being outgunned and outfunded. Local police forces can't match encrypted Chinese-made communication systems, drone surveillance tech, and armored convoys. Every step the U.S. takes to track cartel movements is countered by billions in cartel innovation. And here's the chilling part. Once a cartel embeds itself into banks, neighborhoods, and politics, dismantling them doesn't just mean fighting criminals, it risks destabilizing entire communities. which is why some officials now admit behind closed doors that the cartels may already be too big to uproot. But the U.S. military isn't giving up. In fact, what comes next could be the most aggressive step yet. For months, federal agencies have been quietly mapping cartel networks on both sides of the border. And now, new leaks suggest that the U.S. isn't just watching, it's preparing to strike back in ways we've never seen before. Sources inside the Pentagon revealed whispers of a classified initiative known as Operation Northern Watch. Its mission: track cartel safehouses operating not just in Mexico, but across Canada, where fentanyl superlabs have taken root in suburban neighborhoods. Advanced surveillance drones, satellite imaging, and AI-driven tracking systems are already being deployed to map every node in the network. But that's only part of the plan. Another rumored project, codenamed Task Force Leviathan, could mark the most aggressive escalation yet. Reports suggest it would combine elite units like Delta Force and Navy SEALs with U.S. Cyber Command and AI-assisted drones capable of detecting fentanyl labs from the air. The mission wouldn't be to arrest, it wouldn't be to negotiate, it would be to eliminate. For now, officials won't confirm or deny these programs. But if even half of what's being leaked is true, it means America is preparing for a war that looks less like a police operation and more like a battlefield campaign. And if history has taught us anything, it's that when both sides prepare for war, it's only a matter of time before the first shot is fired. If the raid showed us what the cartels are capable of today, intelligence reports reveal something even darker: what they may be planning for tomorrow. According to DHS briefings, simulations have already been run on a nightmare scenario: synchronized cartel assaults inside the United States. Picture it: convoys of cartel gunmen crossing the border, armed with RPGs, heavy machine guns, and military-grade armor, launching coordinated strikes on soft targets in Texas, New Mexico, and California. It sounds like fiction, but the intel is very real. In January of this year, federal agents intercepted a CJNG convoy just 6 miles from Laredo, Texas. They weren't smuggling drugs. They were carrying rocket launchers, tactical armor, and encrypted radios. The plan? Still unknown, but officials fear it may have been a rehearsal for something much larger. And it doesn't stop there. With Chinese precursors fueling fentanyl production, Eastern European weapons flooding in, and whispers of foreign intelligence support, the cartels are no longer just a criminal enterprise. They're becoming a proxy army, one that could strike from within America's own borders. The million-dollar drug bust that started this story was shocking enough. But what investigators uncovered in the aftermath points to a future that's even more terrifying: urban warfare on U.S. soil. It all began with what looked like a simple raid. $1 million in drugs seized, a handful of cartel operatives arrested, another headline in America's endless war on narcotics. But what investigators uncovered in the days that followed revealed a much darker reality: stockpiles of military weapons, foreign-made body armor, networks stretching from Mexico to Canada, fueled by Chinese precursors and Eastern European arms. A cartel culture glamorized online, embedding itself in neighborhoods, politics, and even banks. This isn't just trafficking anymore. It isn't even just crime. It's narco-terrorism, a paramilitary force fueled by global alliances and hidden in plain sight. And if the intelligence is correct, the next phase won't be smuggling or bribery. It will be something America has never faced before: urban warfare on its own soil. The raid was only the beginning. The $1 million seized was just the surface. The real question now is simple and terrifying. When the cartels make their next move, will America be ready?